Please don't skip and watch the end. Just 1 minute and just $1. Enough to help my family and any family.
I have to finish.
time's gonna change for me. They're gonna run more slowly. Now, when we get back, we're gonna compare.
Time will run differently for us?
Yeah. Maybe by the time I get back, we might even be the same age.
Let you know
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? And please leave a thumbs if you are doing so great in the chat. I'll read them. Welcome to today's session. Before we commence today's session, I have a guest with me. I have some other engagement that I will be stepping out to do. So he will be taking over from me from here. So I'll turn on my video so you see his face. So, oh, my camera is not working. Sorry for that. So Nana Kluche will be taking over from here. So I will let him introduce himself and then take it back from there. Nana.
So thank you. So I'm Nana Kulichi and I'll be taking over from Terry.
So yes, before we continue, Prof gave us some assignments yesterday. She asked us to do submit some contributions to the lecture tomorrow. So I will be presenting some of the thoughts shared yesterday.
Hi, Terry. I don't want it shared now.
Okay.
I'll indicate to you when I want it shared. Okay.
All right, Prof.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Prof, Nana will be helping you this morning. So let me
Okay.
rename. So here is Nana. So Nana, over to you.
It's not over to Nana. It's over to me. Good morning, Nana. Let me start the lecture. And if I need you to do something like read the messages or what was in the chat or the results of the assignment I gave them, I'll let you know. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And this is the third and last day of this module. I'm going to try and share my slides. So bear with me for 1 minute. Okay, great. And we're going to start this morning by having you do the recap of yesterday. And so your first task today is to write in the chat key takeaways that you got from yesterday's lecture. We're going to give it 2 minutes, quickly put it in the chat, and Nana will read it out to all of us. So 2 minutes. What were the key takeaways for you from yesterday's engagement? Fantastic. Okay. Do we have any so far, Nana?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we'll stop right here. And the ones that Nana has, in the interest of time, we'll read and then we'll go to the substantive lecture for the day. So, Nana.
Okay. So from Julius Opon, he said, making voices heard is a means to achieve advocacy. from Alvin Adigu. Sorry if I didn't mention your name more. Yesterday's conversation featured a discussion on advocacy with a case study from SA. My key takeaway is the need for collaboration in advocacy and the role of perseverance in influencing change. From Amwa Akosia Frimpong, a key takeaway for me was that no voice is minor in climate advocacy. From Michael Ni Noye Note, I learned
Me
them.
no, naughty, I'm sure.
Yes. I learned them without advocacy. We cannot hold decision makers accountable, and it would also be difficult to promote sustainability. From Cosmos, climate advocacy involves making our voices heard, especially to decision makers to effect change. From Esther Siao, sorry. Climate change advocacy is important for raising awareness. Engaging the public influencing public opinions, etc. From Wisdom Tete, I've learned that civil society and NGOs can hold government accountable for transparent and responsible decision making on energy policies. From
Okay.
Stephen.
I think we keep having more in the chat. I can see there are
Yes.
43. We need to stop
Okay.
here now because we don't have time to read all the chats. How many have you read so far?
I've read about 8.
Okay. But I can see that there are 44,
Yes.
unless I'm wrong.
Yes.
So please, 45.
Something looks wrong.
And
Use the Alexa box.
so we can continue. It's in the chat, so you guys can see what your friend said. I am going to start the lecture, but I will be interested in you harnessing what's in the chat for me to see later on. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So let's start the substantive lecture. And the purpose of this last lecture is to connect the dots between what we've read, we've heard, and discussed so far, and action. So the first lecture, we got a strong foundation on communication, hopefully, and on how we need communication for our advocacy work. And just judging from the few things that you've put in the chat, it's quite clear also that you have started to get a strong sense of some of the key issues relating to advocacy. Today, we're going to connect it to activism. In other words, we want to move to see what we can do, having this knowledge in mind. And we will start, and let me put this, I didn't put this in presentation mode. Give me a minute to tidy up here. Okay. Is it in presentation mode now, Nana?
Yes, madam.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. So let's start with understanding what a grassroots movement is, because we can position ourselves as likely. Like yesterday, we talked about different kinds, okay? Different kinds of movements, of advocacy. Grassroots advocacy being the one that I intimated we will spend some time on because it's the most relevant to us. We're not corporate, so we're not we're not likely to to be engaged in corporate advocacy at this point in time, for example. So we need to understand what a grassroots movement is. And a grassroots movement in the context of climate change is really talking about climate-related initiatives that are driven by people like you in particular places. It could be in a community, it could be in a region, it could be in a district. So the initiatives that collectively as people, you come together to drive on climate-related issues in the spaces that you occupy is one way of understanding what a grassroots movement is. And it's important to understand grassroots movement also as bottom-up organizations. Again, when we define what grassroots advocacy is, we said it has to be bottom-up, not top-down. So the movements, the grassroots movements, are the kinds that are bottom-up organizations that use collective action from the local level to implement. You see, it starts from the local level, but change can be implemented not only at the local level through the drive of grassroots movements, because grassroots movements can also drive change at the regional level, at national levels, even international levels. So you start at the grassroots, but your influence is felt right through, even to the international space. So now, here's where I want you to come in again. Yesterday, we wanted you to give us examples of advocacy campaigns from Ghana. So Nana, can you tell us what what they shared with us? This is Nana, this is what Terry wanted to start the class with, and I said he should wait a bit.
Yeah.
So how many examples do we have, Nana?
We have 33 responses.
I really like this cohort. You guys are very interactive and engaged. I really like that. So we're going to read those responses. So can you start to read them to us? Are some of them similar? Did you cluster them? Because there's no point in repeating things that the same people, and that's what I had hoped would happen.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes.
Yeah. So if somebody said classroom and another person also said classroom, you don't have to repeat it many times.
Okay, madam.
Okay, let's go.
So from Hafatu Zakari, he said climate advocacy helps to save and support vulnerable communities.
I didn't ask, that wasn't the task. The task was to identify climate examples of advocacy campaigns in Ghana. That was the task. Is that not, is it not what the chat is about? I'm not asking you to repeat key takeaways, Nana. You understand? Yesterday, they left with an assignment to identify and bring to the engagement today, to our meeting today, examples of advocacy campaigns in Ghana. So that's what I'm expecting. Is that not what you have? If that's not what you have,
I found it.
okay.
Okay.
People are putting stuff in the chat. I'll be reading it. Planting for the planet. Go on. We don't have time. The fight on Galamsey by the Media Coalition for Galamsey, Human Rights Advocacy Center. But we don't know what the advocacy campaign is. The Etiwa Forest, very good. Global Citizen, an organization that allows people of all background, climate resistant. I'm talking about the campaign. Okay, so campaign, it's too fast. We can't read it.
Okay,
The Clean Ocean Project is an example. Movement, mobilizing faith leaders. Oh, that's a very interesting one. The Aroka one is the Tiwa Forest one. The National Climate Change Policy is not a campaign. It's a policy. You can't just tell me social media campaign. Social media campaign on what? The fight against destruction of the Achimota Forest. What's the name of the campaign? Okay. I think we can stop here for a minute. But I'm going to ask that you tell me about 3 of the campaigns that you've just posted in the chat. In fact, let me myself go into the chat and yeah. So that you tell us about it. The Young Female Influencers Green Minds Initiative is a climate advocacy in Ghana that seeks to educate and empower young people, especially girls, to become stewards of the environment. That's a good campaign. The Renewable Energy Advocacy by the Energy Foundation. Mercy, what is it? What does it involve? Greenpeace campaign against littering water bodies. Okay. Mercy, what's a renewable energy advocacy about?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, please. It's the advocacy is about the promotion of the use of renewable energy, such as solar energy, in companies and stuff.
Using renewable energy in
Yes,
companies. Okay, all right.
and
Oh,
institutions.
okay. So these are all good examples of advocacy campaigns. I at the end, the last thing we'll do is look at a case study, and I thought we might want to zero in on the Tiwa Forest advocacy, although I'm quite open to hearing more about other advocacy initiatives if there's time. Now, why are grassroots movements important in climate action? They are important because we know that often positive change and the kind of change that is sustained doesn't necessarily come from the top down. If you really want positive change and you want to sustain it, it should come from the people who are most affected so that there's buy-in, so that there's commitment. Okay, it's easy enough unless you are going to have a law that says don't do A, B, C, D. But when it's behavioral change, then you really do need people to buy into that behavioral change. And so it's better for it to come from down up. We also know that grassroots and its grassroots movements, as I explained, that are bottom up, not top down movements. Grassroots movement members also usually understand the issues best because they are part of the community that is most affected. So usually, grassroots movements come from within their communities. Okay, as I explained in the earlier slide, and so they understand the issues better. Grassroots members also are likely to have affiliation with other local stakeholders with influence to bring about the desired result. So they can get help, they can get support from other people. So it's not just them to bring more traction to the issue they're working on. And then grassroots members also tend to be more inclusive because they are in the community. So they know all the different people within the community, the different groups of people within the community, the different individuals that are necessary to bring about change. So they can bring about different perspectives into the dialogue. And it's always good to have different perspectives, even opposing ones, because at the end of the day, you can have robust dialogue. You can contend with people's fears and anxieties and why they are opposed to what you may be initiating. And if when you contend with all of that and you address that, you are more likely to succeed. Then community members are also involved, who are involved in grassroots movements, have a more because they are situated of where they are, how they are situated, they have a more realistic idea of what the acceptable solutions are to the overall community, and they can better drive engagements at the community level. And it's very important to have community engagements. In fact, community engagements are at the center of what grassroots movements do in order to bring everybody on board, in order to be inclusive, so that that change, even if it's two people like we saw in the case study yesterday, leading, there are other people behind them supporting, helping to strengthen voice and bring about accountability because so many people are putting pressure, not just two people. So we have to understand what community engagement is. What is community engagement? And community engagement simply is a strategic process. When we talk about community engagement, we're talking about that process, which has to be strategic, of working together collaboratively with and through groups of people who are affiliated. And that affiliation could be geographic proximity. So a community, a small community in any part of the regions that we are working in, for example. So community engagement will relate to them. Or it could be an engagement that is happening collaboratively with people of special interest. So it's not geographic. What we are doing here, if we were to be doing community engagements at the wide clip level, it will be people of special interest. So we will be a community of special interest, not a community with geographic proximity. Okay. So communities of similar situations who can collaborate together through people, through groups of people, to address issues affecting the well-being of the community, the youth
Madam,
community.
Madam, please, you can't
Yes.
see your slides.
Oh, I can. Oh, sorry. I think that when I. So why didn't you tell me earlier? Okay. I have to share the slides again. I stopped sharing the slides, sorry. Okay, so this was a slide explaining to you grassroots movements. Even though you didn't see the slide, I'm sure you heard me, so I will not go over it. But I'm on this second slide on community engagement. No, I'm not. Yeah. Oh, where am I? Okay. Yeah. On what is community engagement, and I'm explaining the first bullet point of what we mean when we talk about it as a strategic process of people working collaboratively together. Now, the next point is that community engagement seeks to better engage the community to achieve long-term and sustainable outcomes. So it's for the long haul. So that's the purpose of community engagement. We want to engage at the community level to achieve long-term sustainable outcomes and processes, long-term relationships, long-term discourse, long-term decision-making and implementation. Okay? So you are engaging in order to ensure that it's not a one-off event. So community engagement, by community engagement, we don't mean the one-off events. There's a series of events involved in community engagement. It's not a one-off. And we have to understand that the framework for any community engagement is based on principles that respect the right of all community members to be informed, to be consulted, to be involved, and to be empowered. Sometimes our leaders say we have done community engagement. We are surprised that this community is opposing whatever policy we have for them. You have to ask, what was the nature of that community engagement? How deep did it go? How inclusive was it? Who was consulted? Who was informed? Who was empowered? So that at the end of the day, there is buy-in for whatever policy it is that they want to achieve. So really, when we think about community engagement, we should think about the quality. Okay, what's the nature? What went into that? And therefore, the strategies and processes of community engagement have to be sensitive to the community context. Communities are different. Their norms, even their values are different. Of course, language is different as well. And the issues they care about are different. It may be similar, but the nuances of the issues will be different. So there has to be sensitivity to the community context. How should we think about planning our community engagements? The first, and I realize is not on, but it's related to the first bullet point, is to establish what the issue is, identify the issue. What is the issue within the larger issue? So the larger issue and our larger aspiration is to address the existential threat that is represented by climate change. Not so? Yes. However, what is the particular issue that you want your advocacy to be about? When you have identified that issue, then establish the engagement purpose or purposes, maybe more than one. What's the purpose? What are the purposes of our engagement? What are the goals? Establish clear goals and objectives. And those goals and objectives have to be specific. When it's general, we can't achieve them. And they have to be realistic, okay? And they have to be time bound. In other words, we should set ourselves some goals in terms of time, so that we can achieve them. Then we need to design a public engagement plan. And that public engagement plan involves a lot of things, and this is not an exhaustive list, but a public engagement plan is essential right before you start, because that plan will help you identify and commit into the plan the mix of in-person and online activities you want to engage in, the targets of those, your timelines, your budget. You need resources. So even your staffing, your financial and other material resources have to be planned for. And importantly also, you need to indicate how you monitor and evaluate. So M&E, how are you going to monitor and evaluate? You have to monitor and evaluate in order to be able to determine whether you are being effective and successful or not. If you're not being effective and successful, you come back to the drawing table and you re-evaluate what you're doing and perhaps come up with other strategies from the feedback, from the lessons you've learned, and then go back again. Okay, it's long term. Go back again until you've achieved your objectives. It also means that you need to build strategic partnerships and alliances. You're going to have to go and identify who are the local groups, the local community-based organizations and groups in the community that you can work with. Are there any like-minded organizations, for example, that would help support our initiative that we can bring on board actually? Because, the change is not about just you. If you really, really, really are committed to bringing about change and action, and you are planning action on that, then you need to find as many people who are on the same page as you are, bring them on board, so that there can be stronger support. There's strength in numbers. So even influential individuals and businesses can be part of your strategic partnership and alliances. Then you need to identify the relevant stakeholders within the community that you want to engage, because there are some people in communities that are very good at influencing, okay? They are the opinion leaders, or they are people without whom certain things will not happen within your community. Identify them. Who are they? And then you're going to be organizing and managing a structured sequence of local, perhaps even national events to drive your advocacy. Like I said, it's a process, it's long-term. You have to plan it, you have to sequence it. We know that communication, as we established, and the purpose for which this module has been built is essential. It's pivotal to advocacy and activism. But communication has to be strategic, okay? And we should start by first trying to build momentum. How do we build momentum? We build momentum by what I just said earlier, thinking through the alliances that we want to make. But also, how do we engage supporters? We need to engage supporters. We need to organize rallies. We need to host town hall meetings. We need to find ways of encouraging grassroots actions. Again, not an exhaustive list, but these are just examples of how we may want to build momentum for our advocacy. We also can contribute to public speaking engagements. I'm always telling people that even at, shall I say, for lack of a better word, basic levels, there are always opportunities, or there are often opportunities when we're passionate about something to find spaces that would allow us to speak. So imagine, for example, a speech day occasion, or in your old school. In my old school, there are times when they ask the alumni and an alumni to speak during speech day. And of course, sometimes there's a theme. But you could take advantage of that, even negotiate to say, I'd like to speak on this issue, okay? In church, you could speak. You could arrange. Maybe there are certain clubs that you support. So you need to begin to contribute to public speaking engagements. It may not be the most prestigious and big ones. They like big people, but there are others that actually you can contribute to. Participate in workshops and other forums that are related to the issue. It means your ears must be to the ground for those opportunities if you're not invited to them. If you're invited, of course, we expect that you honor the invitation, but sometimes you don't even know it's going on. But if your ears are on the ground, you will find out. You may also want to prepare position papers for the community comments. So if you have a position paper, you share it. We talked about being dialogical, being inclusive. You share it, get comment, and improve on it. And also, you may want to start preparing an analysis arguments to support. Let's say you're doing you did a position paper, you want to influence policy, you want to make certain recommendations. You need to do that. You need to prepare the arguments for that, the analysis for that, so that you can communicate to the target audience that you have identified. Now, you also need to create a sense of urgency. Climate change is an existential threat. We need urgent action on it. So you have to figure out ways of creating that sense of urgency through your communicative activities, okay? I'm glad somebody in the key takeaways that was read, again, remember the importance of voice, amplifying voices. So again, inclusivity is so important. Empowerment is so important in community engagement. So give voice to the vulnerable people within your communities, the marginalized groups who are disproportionately affected by climate change. And increasingly in our research, we're beginning to identify people, voices that are not heard, okay, on climate change. The voice of rural women, for example, I just finished doing research on and their information needs, and they're not getting enough information on climate change, and nobody's tapping into their indigenous knowledge and their experiences on climate change in order for them to be stronger change agents, okay? So think about those things. You need to identify the barriers and enablers to public engagement. you're going to be doing public engagement, but it's not going to be necessarily a walk in the park, easy. What are the challenges you're likely to face? But at the same time, what are the opportunities that you may have in your community, in a particular space, to drive your public engagement, to drive your community engagement? You need to identify language issues, and language in terms of what we mean. Are you going to speak English, tree, ever, what? But also the kind of terms that you're going to use so that you communicate more effectively. There are certain communities that are not monolingual, even if they are small communities. There are other ethnic groups with different languages within those communities. And sometimes we tend to forget that. And so our language choices are only driven by one language, the language of the dominant, and we continue to inadvertently exclude already marginalized people, people who are marginalized because of their language within a community in which their language is minority. We need to produce continuous flow of information and outputs for different audiences. And the information is going to be a mix of oral, ones that can be delivered orally, verbally, as well as written, as well as visually presented. And we need to develop appropriate messages, identify the right channels through which we are going to send these messages, and the target audiences that we will have in mind. And last but not the least on this slide is that we need to think about how we will manage the expectations of those we are engaging and our stakeholders. Sometimes people have expectations that we cannot meet. And so we need to manage those expectations. We are coming from a point of view, particularly you young, educated advocates and innovators. You're coming from an informed perspective. That's where your contribution lies, that you have the knowledge on climate, you have the relevant information. So you need to ground your information on solid research and data. Okay, that's important for credibility as well. And then you need to identify the target audiences and tailor your messages with that in mind. There are a whole range of communication channels these days. Okay, you probably won't not have the resources or time to use all of them. You can't possibly, radio stations alone in this country are 600 plus. Okay, so you're going to have to decide which traditional media channels I'm going to use. And by traditional media, we mean newspapers, radio, television, primarily. What am I going to use? Or even posters, print channels. Or what digital media channels will I use so that I can disseminate my message widely? Of course, some of your engagements will be face-to-face. I established that earlier. But we also know that mass media channels travel far. You are able to reach a bigger chunk of people than you can face-to-face. So you have to determine what the mix should be. And then you have to design, as I said, I think the first day, your storytelling, your messaging. It has to be compelling. How are you also going these days? We have the tools to do infographics. We have the tools to help in data visualization. So you've got to consider how you do some of those things, particularly those things that you probably will put in your online engagements, on your social media engagements. Because these days, digital and social media engagement is key. We are always reminded, because we come from this part of the world where there is a digital divide, that we should not romanticize too much the availability of digital access and tools. However, we know it's growing, okay? And that even in some of our poorer communities, people have access to smartphones, and we can engage them on social media platforms or digital platforms. So I think that a lot of our advocacy campaigns should have a strong component of digital social media engagements. We've seen hashtag campaigns, online campaigns that have been very successful, that have brought traction to advocacy. There are also influencer engagements, people, celebrities that we want to bring on board. And in the Ghanaian space, there are some musicians that we know, but you guys are more on social media than I am. I'm sure there are some other influencers who are committed to climate change, and who, because they are influencers, can help spread the gospel as well on your behalf. And you could also have live streams, webinars, those sorts of things. So there's a whole range of opportunities for you to engage, to use for your community engagement. I'll stop here for any questions for a few minutes. We are almost at 11 o'clock, because we want to look at the case study of Atiwa Forest. And there's somebody here that identified it also, maybe more than one of you, so we can talk through. I'll invite you to tell us about that advocacy. And if we have time, we could also look at their website. When you go to their website, it explains the nature of the advocacy. But let's take your questions first. So Joshua, your hand is up. And some of you can also put stuff in the chat. Joshua, go ahead.
Prof, thank you very much. And my concern was about the engagement, the community engagement. I was thinking, what is the sustainability of those engagements? Because sometimes we just have there is an engagement in the community, maybe for a period of time, and then that's all. Over a long period, nothing goes up over there again. And then the people who were trained, or maybe they were educated, as time goes on, they just go along their way, they are doing their own things. So
Okay.
if there's a bit of sustainability, because just like maybe it's done like every 4 years as we are doing elections, the people just forget it, and then they do their
Okay.
own thing. So if there's a continuity.
Okay, Joshua, you are talking as though you're not the one who wants to drive you're talking as though you're thinking about projects. You're thinking in a project kind of mood. In other words, there's a project that is supporting you for a particular series of activities of engagement within your community, with a particular goal in mind. And you're saying how it is not sustained when that project ends. But that's not what we're talking about. And in fact, that's why I said it's long term. So if you have and projects alone cannot drive change. They may help. They may help raise awareness. They may sensitize people, but long-term change comes with sustained engagement on the issue. So remember, we're talking about helping at a more grassroots level, bottom up. In other words, you, the people in the community, have come together, you've identified the issue, you have decided this is what we want to do. You have a plan, a long-term plan. What are the activities within that plan? What are the resources you need? So I have a lot of sympathy for Joshua's point. A lot of the time, these things are not sustained because the resources are not there. And that's why you have to prepare right from the beginning. You can add to the resources. You may have to fundraise. And I'm saying if it's collaborative, it is building alliances. You bring other people together. What resources can you bring that I don't have? Extra. It goes beyond the project, and that's the way to sustain. Okay. Next question. Sheriff.
Sheriff, please, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, Prof.
Hi.
Thank you for such a wonderful presentation over these few days. Please, my question has to do with the fact that we know that climate change is something that is not really significant. I mean, in a short period of time, it's something that takes a long time to happen or for you to see the effect. So
Yes.
my question is, how are you going to explain to a layman that this is something we should act now? You get it? It's like,
Okay.
how can we put that drive in them?
Okay. Sharif, good question. But remember what we said, I think the first day, and then led into also the second day. Your task as young climate change innovators and activists is precisely that you keep in mind that climate change is not easily visible and obvious to people. It's slow. You're absolutely right. And we said that in the beginning. It's abstract. It's complex. And that's the task of communication, is to try and do that, to try and increase awareness about climate change. That's your task. We don't have time within this short period to train on deeply into the aspects, but that's where communication comes in. That's your task, how you communicate the issue in ways that your community will understand, in a language that they understand, connect it with relevant things happening within the community. And again, in the last couple of days, people did, I even it came up in one of our discussions about making it relevant to people. I think somebody even gave an example. I can't remember what it was. 63 years is not easy to remember everything, but you need to make it relevant. So, for example, there's a flood within a community, and by the way, Bono. If you're following the news, the Bono state in Nigeria has had awful slides that have displaced 2 million people. Ahead in the news today, okay? It's a very unfortunate and an alarming thing, but it's an opportunity also for you to link. Can you imagine if this is what people have experienced and you're able to link your communication to extreme weather events with the science in mind? Because I know that the fact that there's a flood doesn't necessarily mean that it's been caused by climate change. I know all of that. You're content with all of that because you're trained to do that. But if you link it, the people will get it. Okay? They'll begin to get it. They'll begin to see the urgency of why it is that we need to take action. Okay. Geraldo, your hand is up, and I think I'm going to cap it at after the next two people, I'm afraid. So, Geraldo.
Okay, Prof. Thanks for your question. Please, I wanted to ask, in our bid to communicate the risk associated with climate change, as scientists, do you think that it's ethical to exaggerate a bit our evidence and our finding in order to fear, to sort of like solicit some sort of awakening in people to the dangers
No,
of
Geraldo, stop right there. We don't have time. And my answer is absolutely not. Do not exaggerate. Do not sensationalize. We have to be ethical in our communication, and we have to be credible, factual, and truthful. Because when you exaggerate, you undermine your campaign. People are smarter than we often think that they are. Even people who are not educated are very smart. They have indigenous knowledge. They have indigenous experience. I mean, they have first-hand experience, and they know some of what is happening. So you should never, never exaggerate. Next person. Hafsatu.
So Prof, I wanted to ask that how can we build trust and foster collaboration between local communities and external stakeholders in climate initiative?
Fantastic question. And not an easy answer here. Because how do we build trust with our friends, with our families, and all of that? It takes engagement, ethical, respectful, mutually beneficial engagement. Okay? Trust is built over time. Trust is built because of your track record. Okay? So I trust you because of your reliability also. So that's how we build trust. It's over time. But a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And that's why in the earlier slide, we talked about planning and building those alliances in the planning stage. You have to identify people who are like-minded, who are engaged in the same cause that you are engaged in. Engage them, let them know what your purpose, your objectives, where you're coming from, how collaboration will be mutually beneficial to the both of you, and then you begin to build trust that way. The last person is Ebenezer Kote.
Hello, good morning. Please, my question
morning.
is, how do we, yes, please, how do we track progress with communication?
Very good question. That's why I said you need an M&E and a monitoring and evaluation plan in place, because that's how you will track the progress. And again, we don't have, I mean, M&E is expertise that must be learned. You put systems in place, you put a framework in place to do the monitoring. So it's not that easy, and we don't have time to explain it. But you can only judge success if you monitor. Okay. So, for example, you could decide that, have I been able to be effective in my engagement with, let's say, the media? How do I know this? Or within the community, when I did that DEBA, how effective was it? So you need to put in a feedback mechanism. Quite aside from me saying it has to be dialogical, also, what's your feedback process? How do you get the people who you had that DEBA with to give you feedback on what they thought, what they would like to see, what they didn't understand, etc., so that you can correct that. That's the way to do it. Okay. I think we're going to, we really are running out of time. Kelvin, okay, your hand is up. You're the very last person.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. I just wanted to ask about cultural behavior and attitude. There are
Go ahead. We can't hear you anymore,
people who
Kelvin.
are used to certain behavior. Yes, Prof.
Uh-huh.
Please, I'd wanted to ask on behaviors and attitudes. There are people who are used to certain behaviors that they do not know that it affects climate directly or indirectly. And since these
Correct.
changes are not seen or felt, how do we convince these people that they have to change from their previous activities and adapt to the
Okay.
new activities?
Kelvin, that's what this whole module is about. My short answer to you. That's what this whole module is about. Probably you need more, even more modules. But this is about how do we go about bringing about change. Behavior change is what you are interested in. So that's what we've been
Yes, please.
discussing here. There's not a simple answer. It is all of the things that have been discussed here and perhaps more. Okay. So now let's look at our case study of Atiwa Forest. There was somebody, there were a couple of people, actually, more than one, who identified it as an example. And I was very pleased because that's what I had, as you can see, chosen for us to discuss. So who were those people? And were you involved? Because again, it's an advocacy from what I have read, it's an advocacy campaign that continues to invite people like you to be part of it. You don't have to come from that part of the country. And you don't have to have been at the beginning of the advocacy, but you can join that advocacy. So are any of you part of that initiative? First question. And if you are, speak up. Peter, are you part of that initiative? Nana, can you help identify who had mentioned it as an example?
Okay.
I'm not putting you on the spot. I just want to draw you into the conversation.
Okay.
Not Nana, I mean the person. Go ahead. I have at best only 5 more minutes. We've gone beyond time, but I have another engagement that I have to go to. So I have to be a little bit more time conscious today. So let's be very quick.
Geraldo said he wasn't part of it, but he was following it.
Okay.
He said he knows that
I
American
love Geraldo. Tell us about what you know. But what I like is that Leonardo DiCaprio posted about this on his social media. Okay. Let me stop sharing so that I too share information with you. Okay, go ahead, Geraldo.
Yeah, Prof. Yeah, I know that the FPP government went into an agreement with the Chinese government to give us some billion, and then they mine bauxite in the Atua forest. But then since then, environmentalists have been speaking up against it, and they are currently in some legal battles calling the implementation of this deal. So that's all I know about.
Okay, thank you for that. The initiative, and if you go online, you will see it. Let me put it, the link in the chat for everybody. The initiative is being driven by Arocha, which is a conservation group, an international group. So actually, it's not a typical example. It's not a grassroots movement. However, the reason I thought it was important was, one, it's focused on a community, a distinct geographic area, the Atiwa Forest in Ghana, and it raises a lot of issues because when they talk about this, they talk about why it is important to save the Atiwa Forest because it's endangered. Because the Atiwa Forest is home to over 100 species or so, some of them critically endangered species and plants that will disappear if the forest is desecrated. That's my word, using desecrated, because I feel a little bit strongly about what is going on there. And Geraldo is absolutely right about the fact that they have identified that deal that was signed between the government of Ghana and China, and it's bauxite. They've discovered bauxite within the forest and they want to mine it. So that's what environmentalists are up against. We know that forests are the lungs, trees are the lungs, or forests are the lungs. What do we usually say? For the environment, okay? So we can't afford for that to be destroyed. Now, when you look on their website, you see a range of communication activities that they have engaged in. They've done a research report, for example. That's very important. So that research, as we established, is important to establish the facts and all of that. It's your authoritative document. But they've had a series and a number of press releases as well on particular issues. One that I'm just reading from 2021, it's a group of people expressing concern about sourcing aluminum from Atiwa Forest. Another one is about critically endangered primates being discovered in Atiwa Forest. I kind of remember a news article about that as well, and it's been a while. And so that in itself, the fact that we've discovered this endangered primate is news. And then you link it to the issue going on. There are joint letters from people in authority. There's all kinds of things. There's a policy brief, which is, again, very important way of engaging decision makers on the issue. If you go on the site, you can see examples of that. There's even an interview that BBC World Service did focusing on the campaign. So the fact that interviews were done in the media is another example of what one can do in campaigns such as that. Yeah, and much more. So I think that's a good case study. Like I said, we don't have a lot of time. I've gone beyond time already, but you can go there and discover for yourself, and keeping all of what we have discussed in this last 3 days in mind, you can begin to see how that is exemplified in what you're seeing on that site. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to bring this last session to a close. But before I do, can you just tell me from the last 3 days what you've heard? I just want 1 or 2 volunteers. For the last 3 days, maybe even 1. What do you think you might do? Does it generate any ideas in your mind? What's your activism, Joshua?
Joshua, please, you can unmute. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Prof, thank you very much. I think these 3 days has been very insightful, and then it's been consistent in the sense of the communication. I think that through the lectures we've seen the important role that communication plays in our advocacy, and then I think it's expected of us as a youth for us to know how to choose our language in terms of communication, and then find channels or simplify complex models that will be used to explain the complexities surrounding climate change, which is going to go a long way to affect people who are laymen, especially at the grassroots level, and it's going to help us for a better goal globally. Yeah.
Thank you. And Calvin, thank you for helping me remember the fact that forests are the lungs of the earth, not the environment, but forests are the lungs of the earth. Yes, very important for us to understand. Calvin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Prof. I learned that despite climate change is a long-term initiative involving all grassroots members, including the marginalized, I mean the women, those who are practically on grounds, will help bring change at a faster rate rather than just involving a small group of people at the national level. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sheriff?
Hello, Prof.
Yes.
Yes. So actually, I learned from the answer you give to my question. So in communicating about climate issues to people I'm talking with. I will make it very relevant, and then I'll try to make research about what that particular group of what the target people I'm going to speak with, what they are facing. Very relevant issues I can connect with climate change and then make it resonate with them so that they know that it's something we should actually pay attention to. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Michael.
Thank you very much, Prof. So I learned that with advocacy, you don't necessarily have to start big. You can start in your very small way. So what I've started doing these past few days are whenever I'm going to buy something and then the item doesn't necessarily need a plastic covering, I just tell them I don't need a plastic bags. Yes, so that's one thing I've learned.
I love
And
that. We can all make a change in our little corner, but we need to also use those examples in our advocacy and make people realize that even though they are individuals, you know, they can make a change, they can make a difference if they all engage in a certain behavior change. Israel. You people don't want me to leave. Israel.
Yes, thank you very
So
much for the
there's Israel,
opportunity.
there's Ebenezer, and there's Mercy. End of story.
All
Okay,
right,
Israel.
so okay, very much. So my key takeaway is that in communicating about the climate change, I need to check my environment. Whom am I speaking? So if I know who I'm speaking with, them, if I know which language balance. If I'm speaking with family, I know how to. I should speak to them with their farming activities. This is what they should. This is what they should do. And if it's about if I'm speaking to those in class or children, I need to know how to speak to them for them to understand the science things. I don't need to use big scientific language. I just need to come down to their level and speak to them in their understanding.
Fantastic. Ebenezer?
Okay, so I'll also to add up to what Michael said, I think social media engagement can also help with that in our own individual way. So me to have started reposting and things from UN and all that to my social medias to create awareness in my own little corner. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Mercy, you have the last word. And apologies to anybody else who wanted to talk, but I really, really must go. So, Mercy.
Yes, please, thank you. So what I've learned so far or today is that if there should be any change at the local, regional, or national level, or even international level, it starts from grassroots movement. So one thing I've learned is if there should be any activism, we should start from the grassroots movements because they are bottom-up organizations and they influence changes at the top level. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, Mercy, yours is such a great note to end on because Mercy is speaking on all of you, your behalf, and promising that you guys would be the grassroots movement. You guys will initiate those sorts of grassroots movement that can drive change right to the top. All right. So have a great weekend, all of you. It's been such a pleasure engaging with you all. I love your commitment and enthusiasm and level of engagement. And it gives me a little bit of hope in this rather depressing times. All right. So bye.
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 Bye, Prof. We love
Bye,
you.
Prof. Bye, Prof.